Hello everyone, my name is Anindya Mukherjee. Today I'm going to talk about the long-standing and deeply fascinating exploratory problem of climbing the Zemu Gap from south. The primary challenge of climbing Zemu Gap from south has always been its remote and complicated approach. And as a result, many failed just to reach the foot of this col. To add to that, its apparently impregnable defenses of ice falls and rock walls took Zemu Gap to a next level of exploratory climbing. Now, this talk is a part of an initiative by the Indian Mountaineering Foundation, and I am very glad to be part of it. Now, H.W. Tobin wrote the above lines. I'm going to read it now. Though Sikkim is reasonably accessible, only some half dozen of its countless lofty peaks have been conquered. Now, there is therefore plenty of scope for explorers and naturalists as well as climbers. Now, 90 years have passed since Lieutenant Colonel Tobin wrote those lines, yet a small section of the Sikkim Himalaya remains just as scarcely visited as it was back then. Now, before we begin, we need a quick understanding of the anatomy of the Great East Ridge, its glaciers, its rivers, and gorge system. The Great East Ridge originates from the south summit of Kangchenjunga and extends all the way east to the twin peaks of Lamongden, near Lachen in North Sikkim. Now, from the south summit of Kangchenjunga, 8476 meters, a high ridge extends east, separating the Zemu Glacier Valley on the north from Tongxiang and Talung glaciers to the south. Now, on this ridge, between Zemu Peak 7730 meters and unnamed Peak 7038 meter, and the Simbu Twins 6812 and 6811, there is a sudden drop in altitude to form a col at 5861 meters. This col is more popularly known as Zemu Gap. It is also called a cloud gap. Now, to its north, the Zemu Glacier flows to the east to Lachen, to the Lachen side, and to its south flows the Tongxiang Glacier, almost like from west to east. Now, to the south of this ridge, the Great East Ridge, we have sizable glaciers like Talung, Tongxiang, South Simbu, Umaram Khang, and the Zumsulfuk glaciers. Now, amid early mountaineering histories, I came across a Himalayan Journal report by H.W. Tilman describing a 1936 attempt on Zemu Gap and hinting at a few long-standing mysteries in these heights. I began reading between the lines of old journals and books and scrutinizing the progression of exploration around the east ridge of Kangchenjunga. I was flabbergasted when I realized there remained, even in the early 2000s, possible gaps in published geographies. I also learned that in 1936, after an attempt on Zemu Gap from the south, Tilman chose the Rukel Rongyong Gorge, shown here in the map with the red dots, as an escape route. After days of crawling through bushes and fighting off flies and leeches and ticks, Tilman and his companions finally reached an old trail with bamboo poles over rock slabs. 2 years later, when he made a successful crossing of the Zemu Gap from north, he chose not to use this gorge route again and said, "The very few who know the trackless Vale of Tears will agree that this decision was wise." He called it the trackless Vale of Tears. And by the words "very few," Tilman here referred to John Claude White, who traversed this gorge in 1890, and Harold Raeburn, who traversed the gorge in 1920. Now, all these three crossings of the Rukel Gorge thus happened from west to east, from the Gochala side in West Sikkim to Mangan in North Sikkim. Now, this is another view of the Google Earth image and shows just the location of Gochala and Zemu Gap and the Great East Ridge, where you have the South Simbu glaciers and the three different glaciers is shown there. So Tilman and Claude White's journeys along the Rukil Gorge drew my interest further into the Lepcha people and their mythology around this area. And very soon I learned that mountains are not just mountains here. Many Lepchas believe that the immortal ancestors of humanity lives under the snows of Kangchenjunga, and the place is called Mail Kiong or Mail Liang. Lepcha legends predict that after the civilization is destroyed in some natural or human-caused disaster, interestingly, we are going through something like that right now, the ancestors will emerge to offer seeds that will allow Lepchas to recreate the world. Now, the photo you see here is taken from the upper Zongu Valley. On the far left, you see Kangchenjunga. The conical peak in the front of Kangchenjunga is the Zemu peak, 7730 meter. And the very prominent peaks on the right panel of the photographs is the Simbu 2 in 6812 and 6811. Now, mesmerized by this mountain of tales, I glimpsed the outline of an adventure waiting to be realized. An expedition, or perhaps several, reminiscent of times when exploration meant trading lands that had not been appeared on books or maps. I understood one thing very clearly. One must reach the Mail Kiong first in order to access the glaciers of the Great East Ridge. Now, in March 2011, 75 years after Tilman, I went with a group of young lecture friends up the trackless Vale of Tears, up the Rukelchu Gorge, but started from the east, directly opposite the way Tilman came down. As we entered the eastern Himalayan broadleaf forest, as you can see here, I thought of the Fangorn in Tolkien's Lord of the Rings trilogy, the trailing beards, the whiskers of lichen, the sense of something ancient stirring. Like the character Mary, I wanted to say, this is just dim and frightfully trees. Soon above us, further up the gorge, the canopy of tall, mature trees rose more than 100 feet. Lower still, woody plants formed an obstinate thicket, and the ground cover sprawled in an intricate mosaic of greens. Relying on the roots of trees as anchors and branches and bridges, many a times it used to happen almost every day. We had to lower ourselves down to the riverbed many times at any given day. Now, even though, just like Tilman or White, in some days it felt like we were fighting a losing battle with the rhododendron and other close-growing abominations, we did have our moments of fun and hard-earned food. After 9 days of patient struggle, we stood before the confluence of the three glacial streams in the thin, bright air. It felt as if we had approached the entrance of the Mail Kiong. In this photo, in the center, you see Kangchenjunga South, and in the foreground, you see Tongxiong glaciers. And the peak on the right side of Kangchenjunga South is 7730 meters, the Zemu peak, one of the highest unclimbed points in the world today. My companions were ecstatic as they were the first known Lepcha in generations to have traveled this far up the gorge. This is a photo taken on top of the higher Gochala, not the normal Gochala. There is a higher Gochala, which was by mistake, mistakenly crossed by Bill Tilman's party in 1938. So we also, by mistake, reached this higher col and entered the Onglaktang Valley and the, Songri side. Now, with the problem of the trackless Vale of Tears or the problem of the Rukelchu Gorge out of the way, I turned my attention to the ascent of Zemu Gap. Now, this is a very classic Zemu Gap shot one can see in the internet. It's normally seen from Gochala. This is as we saw from the top of the higher Gochala in March 2011. Now, let us quickly go back to the geography of Zemu Gap once again. A long and lofty crest stands before us. This is Tongxiong Glacier. We're on the left lateral moraine of Tongxiong Glacier. And in the center, we see Kangchenjunga South again. To its right, again, Zemu Peak. And on the extreme right, the snowy dome is 7038 meters. So now 7730 meters Zemu Peak is now one of the highest unclimbed peaks in the world, as I mentioned before. So farther down that spar, that Great East Ridge, coming from Kangchenjunga South to Zemu Peak, is this unnamed and unclimbed pinnacle of 7,038 meters. Now, hideous cornices flank its shimmering face. Occasionally, it launches an avalanche, and its ear-splitting resonance spreads into the valleys. Now, then there is a sudden drop to a col of 5,861 meters, known as the Zemu Gap or the Cloud Gap. This again was taken from the Kangchenjunga Glacier. The glacier you see in front of it right now is a tributary glacier, is a small glacier, we can call it the Zemu Gap Glacier, coming directly from the Zemu Gap itself. Now, this is a photo again taken from a different angle I've used. And I just wanted to say that beyond the greatest reach, the white summits of Simbu Twins and the Sinuolchus emerge. And the German teams led by Paul Bauer in the 1930s have climbed these peaks, but both from the north side. The southern flanks of these peaks, however, remains unclimbed. Sikkim government, out of respect for Lepcha, believes have forbidden climbing these snows for a long time anyway. Now, until 2011, the only documented ascents of Zemu Gap, all of them, happened only from the north. Over a gentle slope of snow and ice, people approached from the Zemu Glacier. And Dr. Alexander Graham Kellas made the first ascent of Zemu Gap from north in May 12, 1910. Karl von Krauss, poet, mountaineer, philosopher, and Joachim Leupold of the German expedition led by Dr. Paul Bauer, again a poet and mountaineer, made the second ascent of Zemu Gap from north in July-August 1929. Their party again in 1937 made the third ascent, but I'll come to that. So during 1937, in December, during a winter expedition lasting nearly 2 months, John Hunt and Pasankey Cooley, the famous Pasankey Cooley, reached the Zemu Gap from north on 18th of November, not December. Now, evidence showed that the German party had already been there earlier. So this was the second German ascent and the third ascent of Zemu Gap from north, and making John Hunt's and Pasankey Cooley's ascent fourth ascent. But all of these ascents, mind it, is happening from the north. In 1920, Scottish mountaineer Harold Raeburn led a party over the Guchala across the Talung Glacier and passed a snowy col. This col is between Talung Glacier and the Kangchenjunga Glacier. And they entered Kangchenjunga until the start of the unnamed tributary glacier, the photo of which I just showed, originating from Zemu Gap. Now, they could continue no more. H.W. Tobin was a member of this expedition led by Raeburn, and he later wrote in the Himalayan Journal that mountain sides raked with such continuous hail of rocks and debris that an approach by this route would have been little short of suicidal. 16 years later, in 1936, Tilman and again Pasankey Cooley cut steps of one of these ice cliffs. They finally, came by the same route as Harold Raeburn came. Claude White came in 1890, entered Kangchenjunga Glacier, entered the tributary glacier that is coming from Zemu Gap, and gave up from somewhere near here. And before giving up, Tilman wrote the following words: "Although we were loath to give in, defeat seemed imminent." Now, Tilman described, this is again a photo taken by Tilman, this photo is courtesy of the Himalayan Journal. Now, Tilman described this area's instability thus, in Tilman's words now: "The heat and glare of this new snow, shut in between two rock walls, was terrific. Small avalanches kept hissing down. At an occasional louder roar, Sherpas would leap panic-stricken from their tent." Tilman later crossed the Zemu Gap in 1938, but this time he came from the opposite side, that is the north. And this was the first and only complete crossing of Zemu Gap till date, and nobody has done any complete crossing since, mind that. In 1975, Colonel J.K. Bajaj, Nima Tashi, and Sherpa Pasang, as members of A.J.S. Grewal's Indian expedition, stopped some distance below the Zemu Gap, and they were unable to cross the two giant 40 feet wide crevasses. And the same thing happened in 2008 and 2010. Not the same thing. A British team came in 2008 and an Indian team failed even to reach the Kangchenjunga Glacier. but they were all trying to come from the Talung Glacier and crossing the snow called as named by Tilman in 1936. So they basically tried to follow the same route as Colonel J.K. Bajaj, but they never could reach Tongchung Glacier. Having resolved the problem of the trackless Vale of Tears in March 2011, now I'm coming back to my own journey. And after reading about the failures of the teams that tried to approach the Tongchung from Gochala side, I decided to stick to the Rukel Gorge approach. And in December 2011, established our base camp at the confluence of Talung and Tongchung rivers. The peak that has the sun now is the north face of Pandin, 6691 meters. 11th of December 2011 saw us moving up the Tongchung stream and climbing Scree to reach the left lateral moraine of Tongchung Glacier. In spite of the poor visibility, we made good progress and made Camp 1 at an altitude of 4701 meters. Poor visibility and intermittent snowfall pattern continued overnight and to the next day, and it was difficult to take bearings on our maps and orient ourselves. Now, due to poor visibility on 12th of December, we made an early camp. This is that early camp. And so this was our Camp 2 in Tongchung Glacier. On 13th of December, sky finally cleared and we realized that we were still far away from the small tributary glacier of Zemu Gap. Here on the left extreme, the dome-shaped summit is the Talung summit. And of course, you see Kangchenjunga South summit prominent on the right with the rocky wall in front. This is again our Camp 2 on the left lateral moraine of Tongchung Glacier. This small tributary glacier meets Tongchung Glacier near its head from the north. And we did a recce and a load ferry on the next day, that is the 13th of December. In the process, had a good view of our objective, the Zemu Gap. Our observations revealed that there are two ice falls and one final head wall guarding the Zemu Gap from any assault from Tongchung. Now, while the first ice fall could be avoided by taking a Scree gully on its true right, the second ice fall has to be negotiated head on. Not much could be seen of the final head wall. With mixed feelings of hope and despair, we came back to Camp 2. So on 14th of December, we moved up to the Camp 3 site chosen yesterday during our recce. Now Camp 3 was, as you can see, this is a Camp 3, was established above the first icefall at an altitude of 5250 meters. From here, we had a good views of the second icefall, very clear view. The weather seemed to be stable finally, and we had a great view all around. We felt special to be in a place where very few have ever reached. Now on 15th of December, Tendup Sherpa, myself and Pemba, just three of us left our Camp 3 at 5:15 a.m. And it took us total 6 hours to negotiate and climb the second icefall. I have shown our route, our climb in red lines in this photograph. Now, in Tilman's time of 1936 or 38 and in Grewal's expedition in 1975, this second icefall was covered with snowdrift. Now, however, its intricate architecture revealed a maze of seracs and chandeliers of blue icicles. We were so afraid while we were climbing the seracs of this second icefall. The icefall was like 250 meters. We were so afraid that we hardly spoke. We communicated instead through gestures. And it took us 6 hours, 6 long hours to cover the entire icefall. And the sun finally caught up with us on the last peak. And it made a lot of difference. Now with the light on our faces and seracs below, a sense of boldness resurfaced before us. An ice gully led directly to the top of the final 200-meter head wall. Now here you see the head wall and the final obstacle of our climb. And we initially tried the gully and then it took to the left mixed route where you start with a little bit of ice and snow, then mostly rock sections, very loose rock, and then finally on a more gentle ice slope. Now, instead of the ice gully, as I said, we tucked away our crampons and headed up the rock band on the left of the ice gully. And after the horrors of the ice fall, it felt a lot safer as the morning sun slowly warmed the reddish-brown granite under our hands. Now then came a short but slightly overhanging chimney. You could say this was a crux. As I belayed my climbing partner Thendup, I thought, will the yellow plastic rope break if he falls? Will I be able to hold the fall? Before I could think of the third doubt, he was up and above. I wanted to shout out loud in happiness, but chose to stay quiet and focused on my own climb instead. A low-angled slope now glimmered, white and silver, all the way to the fabled Zemu Gap. Now, within 10 minutes, Temba, Thendup, and I stood on top. For a moment or so, it felt totally unreal. Hundreds of meters below, the grey desolation and chaotic boulders of the Zemu Glacier seemed vastly different from the deep gorge and lush green forest behind us. We could see, compared to John Hunt's photograph of this same spot on Zemu Gap taken in 1937, so much has melted away with the effects of climate change. Where a smooth snow slope once sprawled, a labyrinth of crevasses gaped wide open now. Flimsy cornices hung suspended, foreshadowing sudden avalanches. The wind picked up and it was time for us to head down. Pitch by pitch, we either down climbed or abseiled off less than bomb-proof anchors. And we felt thankful to be the chosen ones to make the first ascent of Zemu Gap from the south. And I, of course, remember this Maurice Herzog famous lines that in any exploration, there is always a great deal of hesitation, doubt, error, and then quite suddenly, maybe, we finally reach a discovery. Thank you very much for being patient and listening to this talk. Thank you very much, Indian Mountaineering Foundation, for this great initiative.